All right, so today we are diving deep into the world of Elon Musk.
Oh, boy.
He's a figure who seems to just spark endless fascination.
Endless debate, too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
we're going to try to go beyond the headlines with this one
Okay.
to uncover, what really drives the guy,
Mm.
what motivates his decisions, and to take a closer look at the real story behind his Twitter takeover.
Yeah, because the story that is out there, it's full of contradictions, isn't it? I mean, this is someone who envisions a future on Mars, but at the same time is shaking up social media here on Earth.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Right? You have all these narratives swirling around.
Yeah.
Tech genius, risk taker, agent of chaos.
Right.
But where do we even begin to unravel all of that?
Well, I think it's crucial to recognize that Musk's path to becoming, well, the person he is today, it wasn't like a straight line.
Right.
You know, it's more like a series of calculated risks and these relentless pursuits, and all of them really stem from a very specific worldview.
Okay.
To understand that, I think we need to rewind a little bit
Okay.
back to his earlier years.
So you're talking about his childhood in South Africa.
Yeah.
Because the source material kind of hints at that period being pretty formative for him.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
A tumultuous period, even, I'd say. Facing bullying, navigating a complex family dynamic.
Yeah.
Those experiences, they leave a mark.
Sure.
Right. And we don't even have to get into all the nitty-gritty details, but just imagine the impact of that kind of upbringing.
Yeah.
The resilience it might foster in someone, the drive to prove yourself.
Right.
And then maybe even a certain comfort with risk.
It makes you wonder about the psychological impact, right? Does that early exposure to adversity fuel this need to constantly push boundaries, to seek out these new challenges?
Yeah.
It's a question I think worth considering as we unpack the rest of his journey.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, that journey, it takes an interesting turn pretty early on.
Yeah.
And it really highlights his entrepreneurial spirit.
You okay?
12 years old.
Wow.
This kid, he teaches himself to code.
What?
And then sells this video game that he created for $500.
No way, really?
Yeah.
That's why.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
To have that kind of initiative and foresight
12.
at that age.
Yeah.
It speaks to a certain inherent drive that goes, I think, beyond just being good at computers.
Right. Yeah.
And that drive, that fascination with technology and pushing those boundaries, that becomes a recurring theme.
Okay.
We see it in his education, his early career choices.
Right.
There's this consistent desire to kind of explore uncharted territory.
Interesting.
Disrupt the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're seeing these early indicators, right? Of what might be considered, classic Elon Musk traits.
Right.
The drive, the risk-taking, this fascination with, pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
But then how does that translate into building companies like Tesla and SpaceX?
Right.
It just feels like a whole other level.
It is a significant leap, for sure. And, I think what sets him apart in this phase, it isn't just his vision, right? Or even his technological prowess.
Okay.
It's his leadership style.
Okay.
And it's a style that's been described as, incredibly effective, but also incredibly demanding.
So we are talking about the infamous Musk work ethic here.
Yeah.
All the all-nighters, the relentless pace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our source material, it kind of delves into this a little bit, and it provides, some insights from people who've worked closely with him.
Okay.
And a common thread that emerges is this.
What's that?
This almost obsessive attention to detail, even at the highest levels.
Give me an example. What does that look like in practice?
Okay, so imagine this, right? The CEO of multiple billion-dollar companies in the trenches with engineers.
Wow.
Debating technical specification.
Yeah.
Poring over lines of code.
Yeah.
Sometimes until the early hours of the morning.
It's almost unbelievable.
Pretty wild.
You'd expect someone at that level to be, delegating a lot of those tasks.
Right.
Not personally scrutinizing them.
But that's precisely what sets him apart, you see.
Okay.
He's not content with just the big picture.
Okay.
He needs to understand the intricacies, the nuts and bolts of how things work.
Interesting.
And that translates into this relentless questioning of every assumption, every process.
So it's not micromanaging in the the traditional sense.
Right.
It's more about this striving for constant improvement for the most efficient and innovative solutions. Okay.
Yeah. Take, for example, the story about SpaceX.
Okay.
and the cost of rocket components.
Okay.
So instead of just accepting these like exorbitant prices quoted by suppliers, Musk, he challenged the status quo.
Okay.
He dug deep into the engineering.
Wow.
Questioned the necessity of every part, every material.
Huh.
Yeah.
So that led to SpaceX like building their own components.
Exactly.
Wow.
And they basically become this vertically integrated rocket manufacturer in the process.
It's a pretty classic example of his approach, though, right? Identify an inefficiency, challenge all the assumptions, find a better way.
Exactly. And this drive for efficiency, it extends into like every aspect of his companies.
Really?
He sets these seemingly impossible deadlines, pushes his teams to their limits.
Right.
And yet somehow they consistently deliver these groundbreaking results.
It sounds intense, to say the least.
It is. It is. Not everyone thrives in that kind of like high-pressure environment.
Right, right.
And that's, I think, where his charisma comes in.
Okay.
Because despite the demanding pace, right?
Yeah.
Despite this like relentless pursuit of innovation, he has this uncanny ability to attract like top talent.
Interesting.
People are just drawn to his vision. You know?
Yeah.
To the opportunity to be a part of something groundbreaking.
But it's a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? His ability to inspire such dedication, such loyalty, but also demanding so much from the people around him.
Right.
It speaks to like such a complex and perhaps paradoxical leadership style.
And, you know, it's a style that, while it's incredibly effective at driving innovation and achieving ambitious goals, it's not without its downsides.
So we have this picture emerging, right, of Elon Musk, the relentless innovator, this demanding yet charismatic leader.
Yeah.
But then at what seemed like, you know, the peak of his success, he buys Twitter. What was the catalyst for that?
It's funny, you'd think someone with like that much on their plate wouldn't be out like actively seeking new challenges.
Right.
But our source material actually suggests that this period of like, you know, relative calm, it was actually a source of discomfort for Musk.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's quoted as saying that he finds prolonged periods of success, quote, disconcerting.
So almost as if he needs this like constant churn, this feeling of being on the edge to like really thrive.
Yeah, that's certainly one interpretation. And and perhaps Twitter, with like all of its potential and like also dysfunction represented, you know, that next big challenge for him. It was a chance to disrupt an entirely new industry, right? To reshape a platform with like global reach according to, you know, his own vision.
And he dove in head first, didn't he?
He did.
The changes were, I mean, swift and significant.
Global.
But before we like unpack the impact of all those changes, I think it's worth revisiting, you know, the reasons he gave in the first place for actually buying Twitter.
He laid out like 3 primary motivations.
Okay.
And they're crucial, I think, to understanding like the narrative he was constructing. The first, and this was like a consistent theme in all his messaging, was this idea of Twitter as a bastion of free speech.
Right.
He positioned himself as, you know, a champion of this like fundamental right, arguing that it was like essential for a healthy democracy.
Which on the surface has like a certain idealistic appeal, right?
Absolutely.
Free speech as this like cornerstone of open dialogue and progress.
Right.
But then his actions seem to paint a much more complicated picture.
Exactly. And that's where I think like this disconnect emerges, right? Let's take the reinstatement of some previously banned accounts, for example. Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
These are figures who are known for, you know, spreading misinformation.
For sure.
And inciting division. And while, you know, some saw this as a victory for like free speech absolutism. Others questioned whether this was like actually amplifying dangerous voices.
Not to mention like his own track record of, you know, censoring criticism directed at him or his companies.
Totally. It seemed, I don't know, at odds with this image of a free speech champion.
Right, exactly. And then there's this whole issue of Twitter's supposed liberal bias.
Right.
Which is another key argument that he used to kind of justify the takeover and pointed to like, you know, its location, its employee demographics, as if those factors were like inherently indicative of some kind of ideological slant. But wasn't there research that was cited in the source material that directly contradicted that claim?
There was, yeah. In fact, a study, it was conducted like right before Musk's takeover now, found that Twitter's algorithm actually amplified right-leaning content.
Wow.
So much for the the narrative of pervasive liberal bias.
Right. It's a good reminder that we can't just take these claims at face value, right? We have to,
dig deeper.
Yeah.
Look at the evidence.
Exactly. And then finally, there's this whole issue of, government censorship.
Right.
Which was a concern that Musk voiced, repeatedly.
He did.
Right.
Yeah.
He argued that Twitter, under its previous leadership, was too quick to comply with government requests to suppress information.
Yeah.
And there were instances of that, happening, right?
Right.
Like the source material mentioned, some questionable decisions made under pressure from, powerful entities.
Yeah, it did. But here's the irony.
Oh.
Government censorship actually increased under Musk's leadership.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So he criticizes the previous,
regime.
Yeah, the previous regime for complying with these censorship requests.
Right.
But then turns around and does it even more.
The data shows it,
Wow.
Censorship requests from countries like Turkey and India, they skyrocketed after Musk took over.
Wow.
And his administration granted a higher percentage of those requests than his predecessors.
It's a stark contradiction to this,
It is.
Commitment to free speech.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And then to top it all off,
right,
those transparency reports that Twitter used to publish about, government censorship requests.
They disappeared under his watch.
Gone.
This entire saga is fascinating, I gotta say.
It is.
The motivations, the contradictions, the lasting impact on Twitter itself.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it leaves us with more questions than answers, right?
It really does.
And maybe that's
the point,
the most telling aspect of it all.
Yeah. Was this about, genuinely improving the platform?
Right.
About, championing free speech, transparency?
Yeah.
Or was it ultimately about Elon Musk's, need to kind of exert control?
Right.
To disrupt, to leave his mark on yet another industry.
Right.
It's a question for all of us to ponder, I think, as we, navigate this ever-evolving digital landscape.
It is a lot to unpack.
It is.
And we've only scratched the surface here. Totally.
We encourage you to, dive into the source material yourself.
Please do.
Explore all the nuances and come to your own conclusions, because one thing is for sure, the Elon Musk story is far from over.
That's right.